Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. I'd like to welcome everyone back. If you could please filter on in and take your seats again, please. We'd like to get started, keep you guys on time this afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in, everybody in the back. Feel free to grab your seats again, please. And we will get started. Thank you guys so much for a wonderful morning. Thank you all for being here and your contributions. So now we're going to continue with the afternoon portion of the forum. I would like now to invite our next panel to the stage. Dr. Grace Bohenick from UCF will moderate this discussion between Ben Carmichael from Southern Company, Wayne Johnson from Duke Energy, Anthony Norrell from Universal Parks and Resorts, Hainer Rood from Texas Brine, and Anita Sengupta from Hydroplane. Please join me in welcoming all of our guests to the stage.
Thank you very much, everyone, and please sit down. We got a whole hour together, and I've been looking forward to this panel, and this panel is titled The Hydrogen Economy to Decarbonize Operations, and maybe a little glimpse into the policies needed to support the transition. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this panel and for the opportunity for all of us to kind of have a really good discussion. I'm fortunate to have our panel today of key leaders and partners who are supporting the transition to hydrogen power by committing their company's resources, technology, intellectual capital that is going to further develop our hydrogen future. So as was mentioned with me today is Ben Carmichael. He's a business development manager at Southern Company R&D. Wayne Johnson, and kind of going in order here. Wayne Johnson, he's the key segment manager for education at Duke Energy Sustainable Solutions. Tony Nero, manager of sustainability and business analytics and industrial engineering at Universal Parks and Resorts. Hainer Rood, manager of business development at Texas Brine, and Dr. Anita Sengupta, she's the CEO and founder of Hydroplane. Now, you've heard a great deal today on the development of the hydrogen future. The Department of Energy is funding the execution of a range of research and development opportunities, and these opportunities will create supply, storage, and market potential. The Department of Energy, as mentioned earlier today, the hydrogen shot alone hopes to drive down the cost of clean energy by 80% within the decade. You've also heard from the previous panel commitments in developing the production, the storage and distribution of hydrogen so that we can move towards this carbon-free future. All these investments require changes in the infrastructure, industrial operations. It also creates the opportunity to develop new materials and new products. Along with all of that, changes to education, workforce development, and engineering process will capture this transformational change to using this hydrogen economy. So with that, I'm going to offer the first question, and the first question is kind of a way to introduce the panel to you. Can I have each of the panel, and we'll go through each one, to take a couple of minutes to tell us more about yourselves and why is hydrogen technology important to you, and decarbonization is important to you, and how that is influencing your own organizations, if you don't mind.
All right. I'm up first. Ben Carmichael, Business Development Manager at Southern Company in the R&D organization in the Advanced Energy Systems Group. And really what I do is sort of project development, and I mainly focus on not just hydrogen, but our advanced nuclear program and industrial decarbonization in general. And so why is that important to Southern Company? Why are these things important to Southern Company? A little bit about Southern Company. Southern Company is an investor-owned utility with 3 operating companies operating in a regulated electric environment in Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. We've got a gas company that has local distribution companies and stakes in midstream operations throughout a number of places in the states. A wholesale power entity, Southern Power, Power Secure, is the leading developer of microgrid solutions in the U.S. and is an affiliate as well. And as we look out to our future, we have decarbonization goals very similar to others in the room. By 2050, we want to be net zero. By 2030, we want to be 50% reduced from a 2007 baseline. And indeed, by 2025, we really project that we'll already be there, and we're sort of flirting around that line for the last couple of years. We take decarbonization seriously as a company. And so as we look out at what our production landscape is going to be, we have both electrons and gas, and how both of those things are going to play in the hydrogen economy. We think about where we sit in the energy ecosystem now, having a great relationship with our customers in these territories and bringing them energy solutions. We, certainly as an R&D organization, want to really thoroughly understand the hydrogen economy, the solutions that work both for us and for our customers to develop the synergies that are going to enable widespread economy-wide decarbonization. So we're investing a lot in the R&D now, looking for those collaborations. We've talked a lot about collaborations today that are so important to put the infrastructure on the ground, the demonstrations in place that collectively lead us in that direction. So thanks for having me today.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.
Wayne, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Grace. Wayne Johnson, Duke Energy Sustainable Solutions, and I work corporately as the Education Segment Manager. So most of what I'm going to talk about today kind of comes from the education perspective, because I work with those clients both in our regulated footprint and on our unregulated footprint. As you know, Duke Energy, we have a regulated utility operations on the East Coast. We have gas operations as well, and a large sustainable renewable energy portfolio nationally, as well as some resiliency portfolios. So why am I here? What do I do for the company? I go back to one of the questions that was asked, or comments earlier, about the course that someone failed, and what they like. Well, the course I loved the most in my graduate degree was group counseling and psychotherapy. And I'll tell you, it's really paid off. Now, my graduate degree is in educational leadership, and I worked 30 years as a VP for facilities and education, managing energy and facilities, electrical contractor, general contractor. So I come at this industry a little bit different than some other folks. So what I think that I bring to the table and to this hydrogen discussion is energy therapy. That's really the way I look at it, because there's a lot of silos, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving pieces, and just bringing folks together to understand, okay, how do we embrace this emerging technology? And so that's where I come together with Duke Energy. Enjoy doing what I'm doing, bringing the industry, our partners, our solutions together with customers, and certainly hydrogen is on that roadmap.
Thanks, Wayne. Tony?
Yes, Tony Noro with Universal Parks and Resorts. I guess being an end user would probably be the biggest component for the alternative fuels, hydrogen, alternative energies in general, and trying to offset our carbon footprint. So our parent company, Comcast, has a pretty aggressive timeline on net zero carbon, being 2035. So it's a pretty steep challenge to get that point when you are a large theme park. So I should say we have about 5 theme parks across couple continents. Our main focal point right now would be Orlando. We have a new park coming on board here. You may have heard Epic Universe will be just around the corner here. And that's a huge undertaking. So we're looking at, I believe, just over 800 acres in addition to our existing 800 acres. So this is back up a little bit with Universal Orlando. The original parks is about 800 acres, a little over 400 buildings. We are a large carbon footprint. And to offset our carbon and still maintain that guest satisfaction is a key component. So looking forward to discussing the whole carbon footprint with the hydrogen aspect of it. Thank you.
Hayner, please.
Hi, Hayner Rude with Texas Brine. So Texas Brine is a unique company. It's the largest brine producer in North America, supplying about a third of the salt needs of the chlor-alkali industry. And for those that don't know, chlor-alkali industry is what produces chlorine and caustic, which are building blocks for hundreds of products, paints, resins, plastics, all sorts of end uses that you use every day. With our huge amount of brine production, the other side of the business is storage. So as we produce brine, we create these large underground storage caverns. And as Bill was talking about, they're about 2,500 feet underground, and about a mile below that, go to about 7,000 feet and 300 feet in diameter. And they can hold about 15 million barrels of brine in them. They're very, very large cylinders underground. They're also really used for underground storage. So we are a large provider of underground storage to the midstream companies like Enterprise and Kinder Morgan, where we store natural gas, crude oil, NGLs like butane, propane, and things like that. And in the energy transition, hydrogen is also easily stored underground, just as we store natural gas. It's existing storage in Texas. 4 different storage caverns are in operation, one with Air Liquide. And in the future, we'll be building out hydrogen storage with Mitsubishi all across the United States. So Texas Brine's pretty unique in the storage role of the hydrogen economy, and we look forward to the future.
Thank you, Hayner. Anita?
Hi, I'm Anita Sengupta. I'm CEO and founder of Hydroplane. So we are an electric aviation company based in Los Angeles, California. And my background actually is from the space program. I also worked for about 20 years for a combination of NASA and Boeing. And my first job was working on the development of Delta IV, which had, of course, liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, and also working a little bit on the space shuttle, which also had liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. So we bring a lot of our space program expertise to our small business. But what we're doing with Hydroplane is developing a hydrogen fuel cell power plant for small aircraft, specifically for single engine aircraft, as well as vertical lift applications such as urban air mobility, as well as rotorcraft. And we're funded by the United States Air Force Agility Prime program. So we're very much on the end user side. And when you take a look at the CO2, from anthropogenic sources, only a small percentage does come from aviation today, but other forms of transport become decarbonized with batteries, because in many cases they can. For cars, for example, aviation actually becomes a much larger contributor to the total amount of CO2 output coming from our society. So if you also take a look at aviation from a regulatory perspective, it takes a long time to bring new technologies into the pipeline. So we're starting with power plants for smaller aircraft first to get them into the marketplace, to get more of the regulation in place for smaller aircraft, which eventually we'd like to scale up to larger aircraft, basically going up to twin turboprop aircraft for regional air travel. But we're really interested in the hydrogen infrastructure challenges and solution space, and we're also interested in ways that we can support the larger growing hydrogen ecosystem.
So you see why I'm excited. What a terrific panel with a broad range of perspectives and experiences. So the next question really has to do around your organization's sustainability goals, and how will those sustainability goals impact your future business and business center, business activities potentially here in Central Florida. I know you touched on it a little, but if you want to elaborate a little bit, I think the audience would be interested in just how companies are really laying out their sustainability goals. Any first takers? This is what's nice about being, owning the mic here, right?
I could touch on that.
Okay, perfect.
Sure. So I sit on a panel with all of our parks and resorts, and for the last, I'll back up. So about 14 years now, I have tracked our utility usage across Orlando, and recently we've kind of came together with all of our parks and resorts to look at our global impact and try and reduce that. So with that 2035 carbon reduction, we have to reduce roughly 68% of our carbon from now to 2035, so it's pretty aggressive. So we are, there's a lot of capital investment that is being spoken of right now as I sit here, actually. So there's a big focal point from our parent company Comcast to strive to reduce that carbon, and I'm glad to be a part of it because I'm very passionate about tracking our usage and decarbonizing for several years now, and to have I guess a seat at that table to talk about the impact that we have on Central Florida in general. With the park, Orlando is the largest park of all of our parks, and we are I guess we're the eyesore when it comes to carbon. And so I guess it's a challenge that I'm glad to accept, and looking forward to that reduction.
I'll jump in, Ben, since you've kind of answered a little bit of that. Our goals are pretty similar as a utility, with 50% by 2030 and then neutral by 2050. It's so exciting to see the things that are already moving very rapidly to meet those goals in our company. It was mentioned in the earlier panel about the massive utility expansion of solar, and we're certainly in play with that. But I think that is a great asset to help us pivot, because those assets can be leveraged in so many ways with battery storage, with the other storage, the storage solutions that have been talked about today, with what Siemens spoke about in the earlier panel. So the options are there as we build this new renewable fleet of how we dispatch it and how we leverage it in multiple ways across time. So I feel good about that. Also, I'm just excited about the rapid, retirement of coal in our fleets. And I'm also really excited about the way our fleets are being future-proofed for fuels, flexible fuel use. So I think that's where I see things going for us, and that plays into this hydrogen economy as well.
I'll tack on to what Wayne said and expand. I mean, everything you said is really true for us as well. But there's another dimension of sustainability that's beyond just decarbonization, right? And it's been touched upon earlier. There's a lot of justice implications in sustainability as well. And we collectively as utilities have a lot of focus on that area as well. And with this energy transition, there's a lot of benefits that can accrue to those customers that we have in our territories that are underrepresented or disadvantaged, and giving them an ability as we evolve this ecosystem to participate in a greater way in energy solutions that can be a bit more decentralized through some of the hydrogen solutions that we're putting in play. The hydrogen can range the gamut of large to small scale solutions. We're doing a lot of work with our Power Secure affiliate looking at how hydrogen plays in those microgrid solutions, and that can really have an impact in a lot of communities. I'll also say that, so as a company that really doesn't have operations so much in Florida anymore, we used to have an affiliate that is in Florida. Our Power Secure affiliate does do a lot of work on resiliency for some customers, behind the meter solutions, things like that here in the state. I think about the collaboration that was talked about earlier, and this is very much a collaborative space right now, and it's really an opportunity to welcome all comers. And I think about what's happening here at UCF, what's happening at the companies that are just in a stone's throw from the campus, and they're companies that we work with. I mean, just think about the testing that happened up at our plant McDonough that was talked about earlier. And the opportunity for things to happen here in your state, and things to happen in Alabama and Georgia, and to synergize on those things such that we do establish the market where folks who are maybe traditionally competitors come together right now to evolve this landscape and then have opportunities for real markets in the future, large markets in the future. That's something that's a benefit that accrues to all of us, not just here in Florida, but in Alabama and Georgia and the Carolinas. And that's pretty exciting too. And it's a great time to be in this space.
One thing I will add is that for us, we help everyone be sustainable by giving them an option to have decarbonized aviation. But what's interesting about California, where we're based, is that 40% of the CO2 output from the state actually does come from the transportation sector, because lots of people drive in California and there really is another mode of getting around. So by having more green hydrogen production, by having more hydrogen availability, we can actually promote hydrogen fuel cell cars for ground-based use, for trucking, for buses, for trains, as well as for aviation, which actually can help our state get closer to their net zero targets a lot sooner. And there is an interesting synergy that when you look at hydrogen fuel cell technology for large fleet vehicles, buses and trucks, it actually couples really well to aircraft and to marine. So developing something for the aviation use case actually is synergistic with those other larger vehicle use cases.
Thank you. Anybody else any comment, thoughts? So it was, thank you for all those comments. And one thing that just popped into my head as the conversation was happening was, it's a move societal, right? It's by company, it's by industry, and it's a greater impact. So I'm just curious about communities of best practices and how you cascade knowledge around. Forums like this is one of those ways. And it kind of dovetails into the next question, which is really about what kind of support you think you'll need from, not just from industry, from your view, but from academia and government to help support this kind of sustainability pathways that we're on. And maybe, Wayne, I know with your background, might be a good place to start.
Well, academia is it's my home. I'm glad I still live there in the job that I have in the energy sector. It brings so much joy to me. The word collaboration, you picked up on that. It's been said over and over and over again. And I think it was said earlier today, unprecedented collaboration. I want to take that a little step further. And I think this is what I'm going to call on academia and on partnerships and on communities to collaborate in a different way. We don't just need collaboration. We need unprecedented collaboration toward action and implementation. So how do we remove the barriers in communities and academia? How do we bring partners together to quickly and efficiently move through processes, to make decisions and take actions? Academia is not always known to be quick, okay? Corporate structures are not always known to be quick, but the challenges that lie ahead for us in this energy transformation are immediate, and the technologies are ripe for implementation. So it's so exciting to look at what we have laying before us right now with hydrogen, with the ability to mix these technologies and bring the best of our teams together, learning from the colleagues that are on this panel today. And how do we come together with academia and say, okay, let's pay attention to all the rules and the regulations that we have to, and all of our corporate responsibilities, but let's assign the resources at a high enough level to quickly progress through these things so that we can take action and make a change and lead our communities, because that's what we do well together. Higher ed traditionally leads the charge, both from a research perspective, but also from an adoption and implementation perspective. Quite often they don't have the capital, right? We need the money in higher ed, but if we come together, we can have meaningful impact, and that's what's exciting for me.
And I think, just the whole innovation process, right? It's a different engagement, it's a different strategy, and our ability to do that with all of us on the panel here will really be important. Does anybody would like to potentially make a comment?
Sure, I'll add about hydrogen storage. It only exists right now in Texas, so as we expand storage across the United States, we're going to have to work with state regulators to build out the regulations for it. That's just one piece of it. There's all sorts of different pieces of industry will have regulations for this new hydrogen economy. But like, for example, Louisiana came out with their regulations a couple weeks ago, and they go in effect into this month. And there's some nuances to that we'll have to work through with the regulator that are very new and they may have not have thought through correctly. Well, didn't say that. But in other states that we operate, like Virginia and New York, we're going to have to work with the regulators and build out the regulations that will support the hydrogen infrastructure and the hydrogen storage. It is similar to natural gas, but it does have nuances like, as we talked about, it's a smaller molecule, it burns differently, so it needs special treatment to keep it safe. But it'll take years for all that regulation to be put in place, but that's as we build out this hydrogen economy.
And I would add one more piece, which is from the government investment side. And Dr. Wilcox mentioned that this morning. They have these new programs, whether it's on the science side or the applied technology side. So with that initial government seed funding, that initial government investment, which goes into both businesses as well as into academia, you can actually come to develop these new technologies. And even our company, we have a key research partnership with the university where they're doing really low TRL technology. We're doing the rest of the design of the system, and we can actually integrate that new technology into our system to make it more efficient in terms of the efficiency of the fuel cell stack. So I think that initial government investment, which can come from the DOE, can come from the DOD, which it does for us, which can come from NASA, which can come from state level governments, is key to integrating those unique research capabilities that exist in small business as well as in academia.
And I think, you all made the point that it's really critical, right? It's critical that you think of this as a multi-pronged kind of effort, right? It's a collaborative effort as you move the research agenda and the actual implementation and deployment, but you have to look holistic across all of the opportunities. As you mentioned, your work in defense, work in energy, opportunities that are coming in the Department of Transportation. There's a whole holistic approach to this. And one question, as we think about this, industry, academia, and government, it dawned on me as we think through this, teams, you have to have the business aspects, right? You have to have the economics, right? So as we engage with the universities and understanding the business and the policy, I think will also be important. So shifting a little bit about infrastructure, and infrastructure was talked a lot about earlier today, and can you talk a little bit about infrastructure that you think is needed to enable your organizations? And Nita, and I'll ask you first because you have a unique, you have a unique company who needs the infrastructure. So maybe you can make some comments.
Definitely, and I'll start actually talking about the automotive space. So because we actually have hydrogen fueling stations in Southern California and Northern California, we can own and operate hydrogen fuel cell cars. And so there's 3 cars in the market, which are all over the place. We have 3 at the company actually, because we want to be, environmentally friendly and focused on hydrogen. But that kind of infrastructure doesn't exist in the rest of the country, and that kind of infrastructure does not exist at airports. So without the ability to be able to fuel your hydrogen powered plane at an airport, you're not going to be able to fly. And we just came back from Oshkosh, actually, where people are like, oh, this is so cool. When can I get this power plant in my plane? And I'm like, well, we'll have it done soon. But they're like, where do I fuel it? Well, that's a problem. So this is where the infrastructure actually is holding up the implementation of a lot of these new technologies from the transportation use case perspective, which is why we absolutely have to work together on that, because that is the only way we're going to get adoption of these new technologies. But the good news is, though, I think it's synergistic, because more hydrogen production means more green energy, it means more decarbonization across the board.
And if you think about the question of how's policy affect that, I mean, we've got some real clear examples just in the IRA and other recent legislation that, enabling credits, tax credits to incent, production and the CapEx required for production, or the programs like the Hydrogen Hub program that IIJA established that we heard earlier. We're expecting a call out just in the next couple weeks. Those things are instrumental, and there's a lot of dollars being poured into that spectrum now that will help companies make investment decisions. These projects can pencil out at this earlier stage, and that is a place where policy can be a big driver. And so there is a collaboration there as well, and a lot of collaboration certainly went into putting those policies through legislation in place that will continue to sustain this place. Anita points to some very specific needs that you see right now. The utility, I think, sees some things that we've been investing in a while in research. I'm just thinking about carbon capture and sequestration, and the 45Q is going to help some of those projects potentially be put on the ground. And we continue to monitor the space for what are those pieces of infrastructure and how does it continue to evolve. Hydrogen filling stations are likely to be part of it. You know, does it slant towards Class 8? Does it slant towards passenger cars? You know, we'll figure all that out. But there is policy that we will, as a collaborative community, identify that we need, that we want. And you know, bottom line, policy shapes behavior, right? So, seen some good things, and we just need to be mindful of what's next and, you know, work
Yeah,
towards it.
just chime in right there with you. It's so refreshing to see the synergy kind of in some of the alignment now of change starting to get attention. So I do think it's a good environment. I think things are moving ahead. You know, there's much more to come, I'm sure, but state by state, I see improvements. And as we digest that and build it and the infrastructure funding, it's going to be exciting days ahead.
I could add with the infrastructure, I think the hydrogen hub in this Orlando area, they spoke on that a little bit ago, and I see a lot of value in that. Our goal was to, we're increasing capacity, right? So we have a lot of buses that we're getting ready to purchase, and that hydrogen play would just be spot on to help offset that. So what policies that drive those factors? I mean, I'm not certain what kind of policies, what kind of strongholds we have on that, but I would like to learn a little bit more and understand what we could do to get to that hydrogen hub locally.
Hayner, I know that, you know, you're very involved in infrastructure, right? And your company has for many, many years. Is there any insights just in terms of creation of, management of, thinking about these kind of larger infrastructure deployments?
Certainly. So salt geology is not everywhere in the United States. You know, salt domes are focused in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Other areas of the United States have bedded salt, which is very different. Here in Florida, there isn't any salt, so there have to be different types of storage here for that hydrogen hub, above ground spheres, things like that, or other technologies that maybe the Southwest Research Institute was talking about they might invent. So I guess it really matters where you are in the United States, where the infrastructure, what type of infrastructure will be used for hydrogen, and the cost of storage in those different regions will be different, I guess.
And you teed up nicely the message that came out very strong all day today, and that is the innovation in this space is really regional, right? You have to think about the regional innovation so that you understand the resources you have, the infrastructure you have, the industries you're trying to support. And so, I mean, I think this is an all exciting future for all of us. With that, I'm going to see, Subith, is there any questions from the chat?
Yes, there is a question from the chat. It's about how do we market these new technologies to the people or groups that are resistant to those changes?
Oh, anybody?
I'll say what's already being done. For the automotive sector, there's tremendous incentives to actually purchase or lease hydrogen fuel cell cars because it comes with 5 years of free hydrogen gas. So when you look at the cost of ownership, when obviously the car oftentimes has a subsidy associated with it directly from the manufacturer, 5 years of free gas, 5 years of free maintenance. It's actually cheaper to have that car now with the price of gas. So I personally like the incentive model as a means of getting people on board. I think that works great for the automotive sector. For the aviation sector, we haven't really faced much opposition. Everyone was like, oh, this is so cool, we want one. But we have the issue of not being able to provide them what they need, which is fuel at the airport. So we need to get incentives from, maybe the federal government down to state governments down to local airports to make that happen. But I personally like the incentivized structure versus something else.
Any other ideas, panel?
I always like including your naysayers on your collaborative team.
There you go.
I mean, I would rather know the negative and the roadblock before the decision-making point. So start early.
Start early and communicate often, right?
Absolutely.
Start early, communicate often. Anybody in the audience here? question, sir? We could get a mic. And if you could just state your affiliation.
Yeah, my name is Tony Thornton. I'm with a company called TTS Energy Services. I've got kind of a follow-on question to a lot of the topics here about policies, incentives, infrastructure, government regulations and whatever. Does the panel feel that the infrastructure is going to hold up your ability to obtain your goals? For example, is there going to be a big enough supply of hydrogen for you all to meet those goals? Any concerns about the infrastructure and the regulations being put in place? And do you have any plans to perhaps make your own hydrogen at your big facilities? How do you intend to obtain these sustainable goals? Will there be enough hydrogen made available to you?
I can discuss that a little bit. I know that our Orlando Park and our Hollywood parks have worked closely with our municipalities and our utilities and partnerships and to meet their goals as much as our goals and come together to, as a whole. And so that's been, I should say they've been very helpful in making that happen. I feel that we have some good partnerships there.
I'll speak. We have our regulated utilities. We also have unregulated offerings. So I think when you looked at distributed generation, distributed energy solutions, solutions behind the meter as well, we have an emerging technology organization that does a lot of research. We've been charting hydrogen and its impact on our economy and on our business for quite a while. And while it's not mature, it's still on the bubble chart, rising in maturity, right? It's at a place now that pilots, are critical. And, there's two academic institutions, one of which is UCF, that we are really, a great way down the road and almost ready to implement some hydrogen solutions in a pilot environment. And I'm not talking penciling, I'm talking about using. So, this is really exciting. So, I'm not the best person in our company to speak to all the infrastructure challenges, but I will say that there's a lot of time and effort and research and planning looking at that 2030 goal, looking at that 2050 goal. We've got a pretty good pathway to that 2030 goal, right? We're really churning along to achieve that. That 2050 goal, there's a few missing pieces to that puzzle. But the technology maps that we're monitoring seem to have the answers. We're just waiting to see which answer at what point in time provides the lowest cost solution for our customers and maintains the reliability of our grid. So we're on point. But the beautiful part of that, and the thing that I don't want us to miss today, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead, Grace, but if I am, it could be a transition for you. The beautiful part of that is it's not just about the grid, it's about what we are doing on our campuses and in our businesses to be efficient. And mind you, every kWh that we can eliminate or be more efficient with, and that's why I want to say hydrogen's critical. This infrastructure is critical, but also being better stewards of how we operate and run our businesses. And I think that's just as important to this solution as all these technologies we're talking about today.
Great point. Agreed there.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that is that's one of our key focuses is operational changes and trying to offset our carbon with reduction in energy. I mean, being good stewards.
Sorry.
Oh, no, man, you go.
Okay, I just wanted to add, I think, the question of production and, will it be there? And it's an important one, and there's likely to be mismatches along the way, right? And we'll go through all those road bumps. But I think the points that we've just heard about really demonstration and folks being ready and what those demonstrations look like, and this even goes to how the question about how we promote acceptance. Putting demonstrations on the ground that are sort of minimum viable scale demonstrations that they scale up. They don't have to be at scale right now, but they're scalable. They're ready to scale with those key customers that help incent the additional production because producers see a pathway for the offtake for users and for applications. It's so important, and we are really at a cusp now where we're ready to do that. So building all the environment to promote that, to promote usage, to promote the applications, to start to work all the bugs out. I mean, we're just at a point where we just continue to execute on this roadmap, and I think we'll close the gap to production.
Yeah, I was looking at Dr. Chu sitting out here, and he's over the RISES program here. That's exactly what I see happening, and people that are leading the charge, academic leaders, university administrators that leading that charge to get those in place. Because once we meet the minimal challenges, then we understand better how to scale those solutions. And so that's the kind of work that I'm excited about here. And just to back up one more moment, if we can, to that energy efficiency piece. When you talk about infrastructure, we're all keen on building energy consuming infrastructure. And we build this project and we get excited about it. We run it really efficiently for a year or two, but then we build 5 more projects. And you have to look back and say, well, who's making sure that first project is delivering as it was designed? So a keen focus on life cycle management of energy consuming infrastructure on campuses, in businesses, so that we don't lose track of the planned efficiency of a project. I think that's a huge failure in our economy, in our energy economy. So I didn't want to kind of miss out that opportunity to say, we have to look at how we're going to generate, we have to look at how we're going to deliver, and then we have to look at how we're going to maintain those loads as they were intended. Now, some folks do that really well, but a lot of time we lose focus on that.
And, so that's kind of like music to my ears a little bit, because what that implies is a life cycle asset, right? And so here at the University of Central Florida, we have a very strong strength in modeling and simulation, in the idea of building digital twins of systems, of infrastructures, of a lot of things, right? And so maybe you want to make a comment on how you see some of that kind of digital transformation occurring in parallel or supporting the transformation.
I'll start. So in our research and development program, we spend a lot of time on modeling and simulation, as you would expect, and really incorporating the use of digital twins as much as possible. And I think, just simply stated, that's just a huge benefit in being able to run a real dynamic life cycle modeling of these assets and the systems. And we are getting really good at modeling, right? I mean, it's close to your heart, and it's really exciting. And it will enable this look on a more facile basis, like Wayne said, to go back and look at those original projects and be able to implement the engineering solutions and tweaks, in that digital space to make the improvements over time. And with the advent, or not the advent, the continued improvements in AI and machine learning, I mean, that'll augment that. So it's just pretty fun.
I'll add to that. With our partnership with Mitsubishi, there's areas in the United States that, like I mentioned earlier, there's no domal salt and there's bedded salt, and hydrogen storage has never been done in bedded salt. So with our partnership with Mitsubishi, we're studying new areas in the United States that have salt, but never been proven that it's geologically and technically possible to do that. And we're using a lot of modeling to simulate what's going to happen with pressures and over life cycles of these assets, 30 plus years. Will that formation be able to contain that hydrogen and safely store it? Because you certainly don't want any to leak, and it's all new and different geologies. So it's going to be fascinating to see what we learn in the next couple of years and where we're able to store hydrogen.
Good point. Anybody else want to make a comment?
I'll say, we're not doing things on, I don't think a model exists yet for sort of like hydrogen aviation and optimization. I think there does need to be one that might actually help to push adoption to show the cost benefits that there are to the owner operator of aircraft and airlines. But we certainly use a ton of modeling and simulation, and a lot of that is related to hydrogen storage. And one of the big challenges for aviation is boil off of the hydrogen if you're storing as a liquid, which pretty much you have to have meaningful range on an aircraft. And so having a better capability there actually allows you to understand what your operational cycle looks like, and a lot of the challenges actually implementing it to an airline, for example.
Thank you.
I think there's two things that I would pop in there that are exciting. One is as we get those edge of grid assets and you look at the energy management, the systems, that cost of ownership we talked about, how we model those, how we look at those edge of grid assets, how we look at the grid assets, how they communicate with one another, modeling how those actions take place. I think that is exciting about where that could go. Another thing I think modeling could be innovative is how you combine financial modeling, procurement modeling, decision-making modeling, from a retro perspective to a forward perspective to look at that total cost of ownership. There's some cool things that energy innovation and infrastructure innovation can combine in that kind of modeling.
Right, which is an integration of disciplines, right?
Absolutely.
And bringing them together in a different collaborative model, as you already spoke. Subith, any questions from the chat?
Yes. About the safety issues with the use of hydrogen for various applications, how these issues are being currently addressed.
I can take it from a transport perspective. So I think the good news is there's a lot that has been worked through for the automotive use case. There's actually nothing more dangerous than an environment where you have lots of cars going at high speed, potentially colliding with each other. So in terms of like crash impact worthiness protection, how it's stored in a high pressure gaseous form, that's already been implemented and demonstrated by the automotive sector. Certainly it's a different environment for the aviation use case. You probably will be storing it as a liquid as opposed to a high pressure gas, but aviation obviously is not as high density environment. And one of the really neat parts is that unlike an avgas or jet A fueled aircraft, if you have an engine out scenario, you're going to be landing, hopefully not landing too hard with all that fuel on board. With a hydrogen fueled aircraft, you could actually vent your fuel overboard before you ever landed in an engine out scenario. So for this off nominal condition, you actually have the ability to be safer. But certainly because aviation is a highly regulated space, a lot of the new regulations that are come into play for getting our power plant certified, for example, would be related to safety, both during flight as well as taxiing on the ground, as well as for these off-nominal cases. But they have engineering solutions associated with them, which we're working on, which we then have to work very closely with the regulator to get them implemented.
I'll say that Dr. Cartwright said this morning, hydrogen is not new. There's a lot of things known about it. One of the projects we're penciling now, it has been slowed down to consider the safety, okay? It also impacts your site planning process. So the pilots that we're doing are kind of figuring out those objections as we go along the way.
But safety is always priority one.
Priority one.
Always priority one. Any questions from the audience? Sir?
I'm Mark Peak with Mitsubishi Power. I was interested in how we've talked about the life cycle stuff, but the supply chain and how that is impacting, because supply chain clearly is something we don't have control over. We get to choose who we work with, but how do we integrate that and make that a better process as we move forward? There's probably a very difficult answer, but it's something that we need to be thinking about, because that ties into all of the long-term life cycle cost assessments.
I think, part of, as you think through that, what I heard, right, is and I'm trying to think of the word, but it was like an intersection of multiple sectors, right? And so trying to find solutions that will have effect to transportation at the same time. It might be having impact in the production, or in the energy market itself. But I think that's what I heard a little bit is, how are we thinking about all those intersections of where that actually drives the need, the greater quantity and the greater need. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts thinking on that.
I mean, I could talk to our own supply chain issues, and so we're obviously a research and development company, so we're not trying to mass produce anything today, but we've already seen it, we've already felt it when it comes to the availability of raw materials that we need for the stack, when it comes to the time delay between different components that we're trying to purchase. So it is a real thing. So I think supply chain resiliency then comes in, so we're looking for backup options for our backup options for just about everything. But if you're doing anything which is like super complicated, there's going to be a global aspect to it. So we've already felt it. And we are not to the point where it affects production because we're not in production yet, but it is something that we're worried about. And yeah, having backup solutions, I think, is a way to get around that.
I'll add to that a little bit. Supply chain, the whole reason you have storage is to have a wide spot in the path. So hydrogen could be used for, taking energy from one season to the next. It's a supply chain issue, and that's why you need that big cavern underground or a sphere like it will be here in Florida, battering on the, if there's maybe some other geology they could use here. But, I think we've learned in this last year since Ukraine, high efficiency or high, not having inventory is a problem. So, good for my industry.
A lot of global learning has been going on, I think.
When I was thinking of that question, I was thinking more on the aggregated demand from the multiple sectors. And so do you, as you think about this, right, you got to think about the transportation, you think about the industrial sectors. Is there a way to think about the solution and the delivery that affects all of those sectors simultaneously? Should we be thinking that way, or should we be thinking sector by sector?
The perspective I see at this at a high level, your pilot projects and things like that, those are less impacted. All the companies are stepping up to make those things happen. But when you look to move to scale, when you look at those maturity charts that I mentioned that has time and maturity on these technologies, if there's not supply chain confidence, those items are not going to move forward on that chart. So adoption at a scalable, perspective is going to be difficult without some supply chain confidence.
Good point.
It could be a benefit or it could be a complication that as we move forward with hydrogen ecosystem and the energy transition, that a lot more of our energy applications are going to be more interconnected. And, on the one hand, that gives us an opportunity to, have co-benefit from, single pieces of infrastructure, multiple uses on, so maybe it cuts down on the infrastructure that we need ultimately instead of having, repeatable and spare capacity in system. But, along with that optimization, the global optimization has broken down, as Hainer just sort of alluded to a moment ago. It does introduce a complication. I think we'll have to sort of work through some of those bugs naturally, right? I mean, this whole supply chain situation we're in right now is not really completely resolved, and there's a lot of things that we need to think about for resiliency in the system. But I do think that the opportunity for hydrogen to provide resiliency in the energy system is really a benefit to what we're doing. And that's something that we think about a lot as a company, to put that resiliency in a sustainable way. And that's, supply chain wise, everything, energy powers everything, right? And that's, something we need to focus on.
And I'll even add that, so one of the justifications for why perhaps, Department of Defense interest in hydrogen is alternative fuel, right? Something where we can produce it locally, we can produce it here in the United States, which actually reduces our dependence on foreign oil, right? Which is great from a geopolitical perspective, but it also addresses a key, energy shortage leads to supply chain issues for everybody.
And I think you heard from, Dr. Wilcox, just how the department has shifted thinking. It's really around the energy security aspects also, which you're pointing out. I mean, since we're some standing on a university campus, I think asking this question would be great, because I think the students who are listening, if they're here or they're online, what advice do you have for the current generation of students who are interested in having careers in organizations like yourself?
I'll start this question off. Living in Texas, it's an oil and gas state, and it's historically, a lot of people go to University of Texas or Texas A&M or these other big schools and get petroleum engineering degrees. But it's, the question I get from a lot of students now is the energy industry going to be there when I graduate? Because they see oil and gas disappearing, but they don't really see what the future is. So we still need bright minds in this industry. We may not need drilling engineers anymore, but we need production engineers, chemical engineers, things like that, that it's still a growing industry and we still need more and more energy. So it's a great place to get a degree in and be in.
And I can add to that to say that we're in a very new space, electric aviation, and I would also argue that from an industry perspective, even hydrogen fuel cell technology is somewhat of a new space. So it's a huge opportunity actually for universities out there to develop new programs that get people into not just the research space, but into doing this job in industry. We have relationships. We actually have an intern program here with UCF. We have an intern program with vocational colleges because there's a technician aspect to this from automotive technology as well as aircraft technology. So it's actually a huge opportunity to develop new programs specifically in this space for hydrogen, whether it's for combustion or electrochemical usage. But I think, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, aerospace engineers, chemical engineers, even software engineers, you all can have roles in the type of engineering developments that are going on. Not to mention the business case, which I think needs even more people on the business side, taking a look at how implementing this new form of energy is going to change a whole variety of sectors. So I just think it's a great time for a whole new suite of people to come in the hydrogen space.
It-
Painter, would you like to, or you want to make a, go ahead, Brett.
If
Go ahead.
if I were to add anything, this has been said earlier this morning, but having real perspective through an internship or a co-op is really important. There's just something that comes from the tactile experience. So if you're a student, you should focus on doing that. Make the best use of your of your college's co-op office, intern office. Go get some placement in something that interests you, that you can learn from. And consider doing that in a couple places. It was also mentioned earlier that diversity is really important, and that's true. And it's diversity amongst a number of things about what you've seen and what you've experienced, not just technically, but your life experience as well. Because just as each of us bring a different perspective on this problem and can share with you different things, the more you experience, the more you're able to bring solutions. And as we mentioned earlier, this is a collaborative space right now, and it's going to be for a while. And having that diversity of perspective and actual experience it's key. That's what companies are looking for and need.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that's critical. And I would say if you can't land that ideal internship or position, volunteer. By all, people see that, I want to be there in any capacity I can be there. Finding that mentor, lab assistants, working in laboratories, lab managers. A lot of the labs and research here is sponsored by the people that are going to be hiring. And you're going to get connections. It's going to be wonderful for you that way. But I also think that it's critical for students to look at your personality. Understand your personality, how you interact with other people, because I think you need to become fluent. And obviously, if you're here today or you're online watching this, our new world of synchronous learning where you don't have to be present, you can engage and get fluency by attending things like this. Then engage. Ask questions, be involved. Don't be afraid to ask a question that you don't know the answer to or that you might state the right way. Your curiosity and your involvement will drive opportunities for you, in my opinion.
Great advice, great advice.
So I'd like to add to that too. The Universal is a big component of having co-ops come in, and we are. That's my team actually. I think I have like 7 or 8 of them from all different schools. UCF, great partner. So it's in the industrial engineering and analytical aspect of it, we are pulling in industrial engineers, mechanical engineers. It's not just like a one fit all. There's with this energy and the policies that could possibly be changing. There's a need for many different aspects of the business where we all collaborate and we come to a consensus.
I really want to thank all of you, our panel, for being here today, for the engaging, insightful thoughts about how we could move forward and how we could move forward together. And so just on behalf of all of us here, thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to just share your perspectives. Thank you.